I'm happy today to have Ari Koponen, who is head of platform at Swarmia. I've known the guys at Swarmia for quite some time now. We have also written an article together about balancing the engineering investment, and it turned out to be one of the most popular of the last few months. So today, Ari will cover another heated topic in engineering teams today, that is how to create a great developer experience. We are seeing this become more and more important these days, both to derive great results, but also to retain your best people who want to work with great developer experience. So as always, in these kind of events, there will be a first part where I will have his talk, and then we will leave some time for Q&A to have a discussion all together, to exchange our respective experiences and riff on these topics. So I leave the stage to Ari. Welcome, Ari. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Luca. It's nice to see you all. So today we'll be talking about how to drive great developer experience in your organization. And let's see if I can start the screen sharing. Can you see my window and the presentation?
Yes. Yes.
Great. All right. So before we get started, I'll just shortly introduce myself. I'm Ari Koponen, and I work as the head of platform at Swarmia. We build a software that helps engineering teams adopt well-researched best practices and become more productive. And importantly, we do it so that they don't have to compromise on culture or quality. Before Swarmia, I led the front-end chapter at a company called Supermetrics, which is a fast-growing scale-up. And before that, I co-led the CTO team at Vincit, where we had 350 software engineers, and our CTO team was responsible for driving the developer experience improvements across the organization. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Mastodon. And I also write regularly at our company blog, swarmia.com/blog. So if you're interested in content around software engineering or developer productivity, that's where most of my writings go to. I'll just give also a quick shout out to Rebecca Murphy, who just joined Swarmia about a month ago. She came from Stripe, where she managed multiple different developer experience initiatives. And her feedback on my talk really helped me prepare the content. So many kudos to her. And also, if you're a software leader interested in chatting about leading developers or improving developer experience, please shoot her an email. She's continually looking forward to talking with fellow practitioners, so don't be hesitant to do so. And now to the actual topic of our talk, which is developer experience. The job title, software developer, is interesting because you can have two people called software developers who work completely different jobs. One might be building marketing sites mostly alone, meeting many clients and wrangling mostly HTML and CSS. The other one might be working in a 20-person team in an organization with thousands of developers building software for a random embedded chip and never meeting the people who actually use the product. And even when people are working on in the same company on the exact same system, people in different teams may have very different day-to-day experiences. For example, one team might be working mostly on a greenfield code base, building some new feature with only a handful of customers, while another team might be responsible for maintaining the core parts of the system, working with a 20-year-old code base, serving millions of users every day. The developers in the team that has only a handful of users, they will be able to most likely drink their coffee in peace. But whether or not the developers in the core system team serving millions of people are able to do so depends on if the company has succeeded in building a great developer experience. And these differences in the day-to-day work of software developers is what developer experience is all about. It describes the overall experience of a developer when they're developing software on a team. And now we can split it into 3 components. How do developers perceive the development infrastructure? How do they feel about their work? And how do they value their work? In research, these are known as cognition, affect, and conation. Today's talk will be more pragmatic, so we will refer them to as infrastructure, feelings about work, and the value of work. Infrastructure includes both the technical infrastructure, the development tools you use, the issue tracker, programming language, libraries, cloud platforms, and also the ways of working. So processes, methods, and working agreements. And then the feelings are about, do developers feel respected? Do they care about their work? Do they feel like they belong in a team? And value of work is about motivation. Are the values of the developers and their goals aligned with those of the company? Do they care about the end result? Do they feel like they're making an impact? So these are the 3 components that comprise developer experience. The second question is, why is it important? And why should we care about it? Or maybe even more importantly, why should your company care about it? For an individual developer, the answer is fairly simple. It makes my life better. Working in an environment with poor developer experience is very draining and frustrating. Well, from the company's perspective, the answer is that improved developer experience boosts both the work engagement and productivity of the developers in your software organization. We know from research, and most software leaders know from practice, that more productive and engaged developers significantly help you achieving in better business outcomes. So now we have the boring part behind us. We know the what and the why, and we can start about talking about the how. Before I start giving practical advice on how to improve your developer experience, I want to spend a few minutes on talking about how to measure developer experience. From building software, we know that if you're trying to optimize anything that is even slightly more complex, you always need to measure what happens in the real production system to ensure you're making real improvements. For example, if you've ever dealt with the Postgres query optimizer, you know that you can write an SQL query that performs exceptionally well for one dataset and then gloriously fails in production for another dataset. And the same thing applies to developer experience too. For example, you might decide to maximize the flow of individual developers and decide to assign work so that the same person always works with the same part of the code base. And then after a while, you'll wonder why code reviews take forever and are mostly useless, or why everyone else is unable to fix bugs when someone is sick and the production is on fire. If you're just getting started with measuring developer experience, my advice is talk to your managers, your team leads, your developers. What are the 5 to 10 top things causing a bad experience for your developers and breaking their flow? Select 1, 2, 3, a few of the most impactful problems and set yourself a measurable goal. In the beginning, most companies I've seen commonly, they start with improving things like compile times or the number of flaky tests, and they measure things related to the development infrastructure. This is fairly straightforward, but in the long run, you need to be able to address bigger problems like company culture or the way you structure your teams. And to achieve this, you need to understand all the 3 components of developer experience: the infrastructure you have in place, people's feelings about work, and how they value their work. And to do this properly, you need multiple measures from multiple different angles. Specifically, you need engineering metrics and developer feedback. So on the engineering metrics side, you have common things like cycle time. So how long does it take for work to get from start to finish? Flow efficiency, which tracks how well people can focus on their current task. Then you have batch size, which is basically how big your pull requests are. And DORA metrics, which measure how fast and safe it is to get code to production. And then there's other things like test flakiness, planning accuracy, and investment balance. On the developer feedback side, you have things that are hard to measure from the systems that you're using. These are usually things like satisfaction and well-being, feelings about workload, deep work, on-call experience, and so on. And if your teams have a high level of psychological safety and trust, one-on-one meetings and retrospectives are the best way to get genuine and timely feedback from developers. Also, especially if you work in a larger company, you might want to make it easy for developers to report issues with internal tooling and processes immediately when they face them. You can and you should also run surveys, but if you run them too often and you have too many questions in them, people won't answer the surveys. So they're practically always a lagging indicator. And you should try to find ways to track more real-time signals when possible. Let's take an example. For example, on-call experience. It might be tempting to run a developer survey every 3 to 6 months, where you ask people questions about their on-call experience. But this is a very long cadence for improvements. Like if you get feedback only every 3 to 6 months, especially on the team level. So what you can do instead is that you can have the person who is on call write down a summary at the end of the shift. So you can get fast feedback and continually improve. You can also, for example, look at the work week of the person on call. Did they have time for anything else than putting out fires? And this is what measuring developer experience looks like most of the time. You try to find the best way to understand the day-to-day experience of your developers in a reliable way. And then you make sure you're not relying only on engineering metrics or developer feedback, but both. So now you have hopefully an idea on how you can measure if you're making progress. So let's go to the beef of this talk, which is the practical things that will help you make actual progress on developer experience. So how to drive great developer experience. I could speak about this for hours. Now I have 15 minutes left. So I want to make sure you're leaving this talk with practical ideas on how to improve. And I will now present 3 fairly different ways or strategies for improving developer experience. And you will notice that none of them is linked only to one component of developer experience, infrastructure, feelings, or value of work. These things are always intertwined. And as a result, for example, changes in the development infrastructure impact how people feel about their work and how they value their work. If they're able to complete their tasks faster without having to wait, and if they can ship a lot of stuff to the users, they will feel that they're impactful and it's nice to work. The first way to improve developer experience is to reduce developer wait times and interruptions. The number one driver for developer experience is flow. And the number one enemy of flow is unnecessary wait times and interruptions. Getting to a flow state allows developers to focus on their work. They get a sense of accomplishment and enjoy tackling these challenging problems that they have. And unnecessary wait times and interruptions, on the other hand, make developers frustrated and unproductive. There are several things that can cause unnecessary wait times and interruptions. It can be the tooling. It can be a slow development environment, poor documentation, flaky tests. It can be on the team level. It may be slow code reviews or too many meetings or continually shifting priorities. Or then it's on the company level. you're working in silos, you have poor cross-team communication, or you have unclear priorities. And in terms of developer experience, developers normally themselves focus on the tooling, like code build times. And that's the part that is most familiar with, the developers are most familiar with, and it's under their control. So it's easy to focus there. But these two parts, the team and the company level, can often make even a larger difference in terms of wait times and interruptions. To make this concrete, let's run through a quick visualization of a developer's workday. So here we have a visualization where the blue part is this level of flow the developer is in during their day. And there are several studies on how long it takes for a person to get back to flow after an interruption. For this visualization, we'll assume it takes 20 minutes, which is a slightly conservative estimate. But you'll get an idea. It will show you that it takes time to get back to flow. And so this person is working uninterrupted and having only a lunch break in the middle and a 20-minute light break every hour. So that's when the flow dips. And they're getting stuff done and enjoying their life. And in this particular case, enjoying a great work-life balance, since they're only working from 9 to 5 and having 1 hour of lunch. But in any case, now let's add a few interruptions. Let's say they're reading 20 minutes of Slack in the morning. They have a 20-minute daily. There's one Slack ping in the middle of the day that requires their attention, one CI/CD breakage that they need to solve. There's one meeting on the afternoon. There's one blocker where they can't solve the problem themselves. They need to wait for someone to answer to them in Slack. And then there's 30 minutes of code review at the end of the day. So what happens to the amount of flow they have in their day? Even with these few interruptions, the amount of flow decreases 40%. And while this is a fairly contrived example, you get the idea, like how easy it is for different interruptions to really ruin the flow state of a developer. And to be honest, if you look at the day with interruptions here at the bottom, for many developers, this would actually be a pretty decent workday. Like they have 5 decent sections of flow. Slack and code review happen at the start and the end of the day. In many real life cases, like even during my career, the situation has been much worse. So how do we then sort of go about fixing this? Like if the wait times and interruptions are really killing the flow of the developers? Well, the first part is to build observability into your development process. I already talked about measuring developer experience and why it's necessary, but it's especially important for tackling wait times and interruptions. As we saw, there's like a number of things that can cause these interruptions and wait times, and not all of them are equal. And it's impossible to decide what is really important unless you get feedback from your developers and have some metrics that allow you to analyze the bottlenecks. Here's a fairly simple metric like change lead time, also known as pull request cycle time. It can give you quickly an idea on where your current ways of working might be breaking. For example, long code review times are very common with many development teams. If your code reviews take 2 days, which is actually not very uncommon, how will developers be able to maintain flow over any kind of large tasks that need more than a single PR? Once you know what is happening, you should prioritize what you do next, and you should really tackle issues one by one. You can't fix everything in a single go, and changing many things at the same time makes it very hard for you to analyze like if the changes really worked or not. And the last point is that you should give developers easy access to the tools they need. This is sometimes the simplest and cheapest way to improve developer flow. We've, for example, seen teams that have consistently struggled with code review times. And when they've enabled Swarmia's pull request review working agreement and Slack notifications, their review times have been cut in half. Another great example is hardware. Here's a tweet from Gergely Oros explaining why Uber and Shopify replaced their developers' Intel MacBooks with the M1 MacBooks, which cost about more than $2,000 each. Sometimes the cheapest solution is just to throw more computing power at the problem, especially when it comes in a package that consumes less power and is portable. So it's also good for the environment. So reducing wait times and interruptions by improving your development infrastructure is one of the most powerful ways to improve developer experience. Developers who can maintain flow, build things faster, and feel less frustrated. And since they are consistently making progress and shipping things, they also find their work more valuable and impactful. The second way for tonight is to invest in maintaining a healthy code base. And this sounds like a no-brainer, but actually most teams struggle with this in real life, especially if the company is growing fast and a lot of code is produced all the time. Most developers have seen chaotic working environments with breaking tools, bugs, and constant firefighting. And often this is the result of trying to run the engineering organization as a feature factory with 100% efficiency all the time. You might be familiar with this tweet. It's my favorite way of visualizing what happens when you ignore managing complexity and technical depth. If you don't continually manage complexity, you get overwhelmed with unplanned work and in the end, just struggle to keep the lights on. And so how do you ensure developers have a healthy environment to build and maintain features in? And the first step here is to track your investment balance. Some of the people who have read the refactoring issue might be familiar with this concept. So I've seen organizations where the team tries to commit to developer experience improvements and reducing technical debt, but they never achieve their goals because they have no way of tracking if they are really doing so and continually get overwhelmed with feature work and bugs and everything that's of higher priority. And this is what an investment balance looks like. The categorization here in this investment balance is originally from Dropbox, and it divides work into 4 categories based on its impact. So building new stuff, improving things, improving developer productivity, and keeping the lights on, also known as KTLO. And this categorization allows you to see how much of your work is firefighting and fixing bugs. That's the KTLO part, keeping the lights on. It also allows you to improve developer productivity and motivation, because when developers see that there's an actual section in your investment balance for improving developer productivity, and it's a company goal, they will be motivated. And also, additionally, it makes it possible to communicate impact, because developers, in the end, they want to build great things. And if they can understand how to build new stuff and improving things categories, which are often the largest categories, contribute to the product's success, they can be proud. And once you understand your investment balance, you should ensure that you're keeping your levels of KTLO manageable. No one wants to work in a team that is consistently firefighting. Anything above 30% is pretty bad, and you should really dive into the reasons and make the necessary fixes. Also, you should invest continually above 10% in improving developer productivity. Making this into a team goal and tracking it together is surprisingly powerful. One of the best things is that the team can start talking about what kinds of improvements are the most impactful things that we should tackle. If you don't have a goal like this, developers will either do one of the two things. They will either make these improvements secretly outside of the issue tracker, or they will bake them into existing feature work, and 2-day tasks become 2-week tasks suddenly. And this kind of solo behavior does not always end up with the best result. Anyone who has ever refactored ugly code just to discover that the only thing you really did was shift complexity from one place to another knows this. And if you have ever had a coworker who broke familiar abstractions just to make the code look the way they prefer it, you know this too. So by giving the teams the tools that they can use to track their investment balance and the permission to continually reduce their KTLO and improve developer productivity, you can turn developer experience work into a team effort. And the result is better infrastructure, but also it improves how people feel about their work and value their work. The third and the last thing for tonight is to empower teams. Product management. It's a common source of pain among developers. Unclear goals and requirements, unreasonable deadlines, arguments over roadmap and priorities, high priority tasks that override everything else. No one really knows why. For too many developers, when you talk about product managers, they think about something like this. A person whose job they don't really understand or value, someone who asks them to do annoying things that hinder their day-to-day work. When companies have problems with product management, a solution they unfortunately many times use is they add more processes and people and formal roles and layers between the developers and the customers. The end result is that you lose track of the customer. And developers and product management are still not solving problems together. If you want developers to feel impactful, for them to value their work, if you want them to work together in the same team with product managers, rather than feeling like opponents sometimes, you should build teams that have all the necessary skills in them. These kinds of empowered teams can own customer experience of a feature or parts of the product end to end. And these teams grasp the impact of their work, but they also have a higher autonomy and they encounter fewer blockers stopping work. All things that contribute to a great developer experience. So how do you do this in practice? There's a lot that goes into building empowered teams, but here are three main things. The most important, the first thing is to build cross-functional teams. Unless you have all the necessary skills like product design and developers working together in the same team, they won't be able to tackle customer problems end to end. Secondly, you should let the teams own the problem and the solution. This creates shared accountability, which means that the team members will have a collective responsibility over the success or the failure of the solution, not just the parts of it. The result is a better product, but also a higher sense of impact and belonging. And thirdly, you should run blameless retrospectives. This is vital for building psychological safety and being able to continually improve. When something goes wrong, don't ask who, but why. This ensures you're actually fixing problems and not just blame shifting. And this is also a great culture check. If you can't run blameless retrospectives, building a great developer experience through empowered teams is likely to fail. As a summary, empowering teams improves developer experience by allowing developers to deeply understand their impact. It makes them feel better about their work since there's less conflict with others, and it improves the development infrastructure itself by removing a lot of the friction and process that is caused by otherwise complex product management challenges. To recap, here are the three effective ways and strategies to improve developer experience: reduce developer wait times and interruptions, invest in maintaining a healthy code base, and empower your teams. Thank you. And now is the time for the questions and comments.
Thank you so much, Ari. Really, I think it was a fantastic talk. And my opinion is that you shared way more than just how to create great developer experience, but this is in a way a recipe for creating great teams, great engineering teams, right? I mean, and I think it's no coincidence, because as you said, developer experience is such a wide concept that basically taking care of developer experience means taking care of what means to create a great team. One thing that I want to first note and then ask you is, at the beginning, you rightfully mentioned all the elements that make great developer experience. And I thought that it is kind of like when we talk about UX versus UI, there's a lot of talk about developer experience that is just about tools, things that say, hey, you should just improve your CI/CD pipeline, you should improve this specific workflow about code reviews, etc. But it fails to take into account the UX part of the DX, right? The part about feelings, the part about time blockers. So I love that your talk highlighted this. And so do you agree that basically it's much more than tools, and that the part about optimizing how people spend their time, the engineering investment, etc., sometimes makes for a larger part even than what drives a great DX?
Yeah, I think there's this big confusion also in the concepts, because we talk about developer experience in two different contexts. So this talk is in the context of how do you improve it in your organization, within the company where you're working. And there's a lot of DX or developer talk, especially in the front-end community, but also like if you're building tools, like if your product is a developer tool, then when you talk about developer experience, you're talking about tooling. So that is a big source of confusion. I also think that the reason is partly because developers, like as a software engineer, I would like to solve the problems with software. I would like to solve them, with the things that I control. But a lot of the time, the things really are not like software things, and I don't control them. So that's one thing that really drives the way developers think.
Yeah, totally agree. It was a great insight. We are biased in solving problems with software first, and then with processes second. So let's start the questions. I mean, I would have so many questions myself, but I would love to leave the stage to others. So do you have any questions, guys? Feel free to raise your hand or just to unmute yourself and ask for anything. Hey, Adam, you can unmute and ask the question.
Absolutely. So first of all, thanks for the presentation. And my first question would be about maybe you can share some stories. How does it usually look like in terms of how people start? Because, I'm interested in developer experience, but my team is not, for instance. How to start, because probably there are some tools and so on. There is this like knowledge, there is this, everyone wants to do that, but when there is a time, so who wants to improve it and work on that? Like everyone is silent. So maybe can you share some success stories, or, how does it usually look like in a successful implementation, or the road to improve DX in a team or a company?
Yeah, sure. So unfortunately, like this is a senior developer answer, it depends. But like I think that the important thing is for you to get your team on board in some way or another. And that's why in the beginning, when I said like, how do you get started with measuring software development, or I mean developer experience, there is this like you should get started with talking with the people. And if they feel that, like, because if your company doesn't have problems with developer experience, then you don't need to solve anything, but there most likely is. And if you get the people to express their frustrations and the things that really annoy them, that they really feel that should be fixed, and you can select the top ones, that will give you, like, you should get started with something where you can gain momentum. That is sort of the most important thing. Select the team that is the most like most excited about things like developer experience, and then take the problems that are sort of impactful enough that you really can spend time on them, but at the same time, they are fairly easy to solve. Like, you shouldn't be like, the first thing shouldn't be like, oh, let's, transform every team into an empowered team and, make a organizational transformation or something. The first things should be around like, how do we, if you have a lot of flaky tests, that is, for example, an easy thing to solve. On the part of like, when do the ready-made tools come in? Like, from the perspective of our product, I can say that anyone can take it into use. And I personally couldn't imagine like living without Swarmia now that I have it. But like, because there are some like very, very nice things that you just like, even seeing like the flow of work. And when people complain about shifting priorities, like if there is something where you can see like how people have been working on 5 different tasks within a single week, that can be like an empowering experience for someone in terms of like, oh, there are actually tools that can communicate my frustration. Like that what I see there is what I experience every day. So those are the 2 things. So you should really start it with something where people feel that you're empowering them, you're solving something for them. And then the another thing is that when you take these tools into account, you should drive for like people to see these tools as solving their problems and not something that you use to, stalk on them from the top.
Mm-hmm. If I may, just a quick comment about it. And I will pass on. So basically what you're saying is that, okay, you can talk and so on, explain the benefits in general, so you can show the presentation, but if you combine that with, something relevant to the team or something like that, so some numbers, okay, guys, let's take a look. We are doing like 100% features. We are not doing anything to preserve our productivity or anything to address our technical debt. The numbers will speak, and it's a great way to actually get them involved. Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds pretty much what. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Adam, for the question, and Ari for the great answer. Chamaka.
Thank you, Ari, for the presentation. I'm going to piggyback off what Adam just said. This is kind of something that is particularly frustrating in my case. So I like the investment balance that we just spoke about. I did not see the article, I would read it. But I wanted to ask, like, how can we create an investment balance that reflects investment in a healthy code base, particularly related to productivity and keeping the lights on, especially if you are a product-driven team? Do you have any advice for that?
Can you elaborate a little bit? What do you mean? Like, do you mean that how do you actually get access to how can you actually visualize the investment balance for your team? Or once you see it, how do you start moving it to a healthy direction?
The latter. How do we move to a healthy direction for product-driven team, like a team that is always build new things, build new things, build new things? How do we kind of shift the momentum and be like, okay, we want to invest in healthy code base, we want to invest in maintaining a healthy code base?
Yeah. Well, getting a visualization of your keeping the lights on work is most likely the most effective way, because if the leadership sees that you're spending 40, 45%, even 30% of all your time on just keeping the lights on, like, everyone realizes that, hey, like, this can't go on. Like, basically, 1/3, half of your team's time is going to just, keeping the lights on. So when you visualize that, and when you do the visualization, you can do it in Swarmia or some other tools. But the important thing is to look at the pull requests data and not just the issue tracker. If you look at just at the issue tracker, you will most likely have, I would say, at least half of the KTLO work does not show up in the issue tracker. Like when people quickly fix bugs, when people quickly fix a production issue, no one goes to, like, if you have a production issue or like a high priority bug, a lot of the time people don't go to Jira to like, oh, I'll just first create a ticket and then go and fix it. So you should make sure that you're capturing all the KTLO work, or at least majority of it. And and if it's high, then that's most likely something where you can start talking about, like, this is really weighing on our team. Then the another part is that once you get the KTLO part down, you can start about thinking about developer productivity. Well, it's hard to sort of give advice because I don't sort of know the environment where you're working. Like if it's like, it can be a leadership problem. And if it's like that the leadership doesn't understand the value, then you should probably try to get them to read, the refactoring article, or in general, like this type of leadership articles that really showcase the importance of improving developer productivity continually. The Dropbox article, I think Lauri, who wrote the refactoring article, probably links to that in the article, like, to get them to feel like, okay, if Dropbox is doing this, like if like all the cool kids are doing this, then maybe we should be doing it too, sort of like. But it depends, like, on the leadership, like what's the angle. And this is then more like a politics thing, where you just need to be sort of smart on how do you educate and prove that this is valuable.
Yeah, thank you very much. That makes sense. It's usually, especially for the prioritization bits, we need buy-in from leadership, because what I've realized in my case is I try to prioritize some productivity work, and I get to do it outside of my work cycle, like outside of my work day. And it kind of takes away from my work-life balance, but I just see it as a necessary sacrifice to make. But if we're able to get buy-in from leadership, then it wouldn't be something that's done by the side, by the way. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, about this, I may add that something that worked for me in getting buy-in from leadership about spending more time, either on KTLO or improving productivity, is really to have like swim lanes of work, like fixed percentage of work allocated on those things. Like Ari shared in the presentation, I mean, those percentages, I don't think they should only be, measurements that you make to assess, but they can be goals that you want to achieve with your team. Because I mean, what I've seen in a couple of teams is that, let's say, otherwise what you do is you do like your weekly or sprint planning, where you pit against themselves all the various things that you can do. If among these things there are, even maintenance or productivity things that you have to do, it's like every time you have to negotiate to do them against other features. And so it's a conflict like every week. While instead, sometimes it's easier, at least that has been my experience, to like negotiate once and for all that you spend like 20% of time on some of these things, all the sprint, and then it's clear to all the stakeholders, and you don't have to talk about it, all the time, and it's done. And it's like magic, it works. But I agree that that goes back to what Ari said, requires some awareness also on the leadership side. So maybe that comes after, showing the hard numbers about how much time you are spending anyway of fixing bugs, etc. I don't know, Ari, if that makes sense to you. That reflects your experience.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. That's how we basically do it in our team, for example, right now. So we have a goal of spending a specific percentage on developer productivity, and we use Kanban, so we have a work in progress limit of 3 stories. So every now and then we look at the investment distribution and we see, like, have we really been doing developer productivity work as we've agreed. And then if we haven't done, we'll take one of the swim lanes for a larger developer experience thing. Like it may be working on some of the core abstractions. It may be something on our tooling around some of the, like we use a lot of queues. So we might be doing some tooling on those. But like that can only happen after the leadership is like willing to say that, okay, spending 10%, spending 20% is okay. And really, like, if that is not the place where you're at, then you need to find a way to prove why this is important. And reducing the KTLO part may be one of the best strategies if it's high. Usually, if your team is not investing in this, the KTLO part will be high. But it's only it's something you can't predict 100%.
Yeah, makes totally sense. Are there other questions? Hey, Adam, please go.
Okay, another question. So there are a few ways to actually work with developer experience within the team. One of them is working reactively. So there is a like trigger, there is a message saying, hey, something is broke, something is lower than it's supposed to be. Or the other tactic approach would be a proactive one that we check it like every time and see whether everything is working as expected and whether there are any trends. And actually, it's a question for the entire group. Maybe we can exchange some strategies or tactics, how it worked with our teams and what worked for you. That would be interesting to hear, and I can start like with a simple example of mine. We had this duty, a person on duty. For instance, every week we exchanged the person who was responsible to check the metrics around the system we were responsible for. And this person every week at some date like presented some insights. Okay, so tests are faster, tests are slower. We need like a little bit attention to this type of ticket and so on and so on. So this way we kind of build a proactive approach to looking into the metrics and improving the system. And so that's one of the examples. Maybe you have your own. It would be great to hear them.
I don't know, Ari, if you want to go first. Otherwise, I can reply, or how you prefer.
Yeah, well, yeah, go ahead. I'm interested in hearing.
No, yeah, I mean, my perspective is that, I mean, most new things in an engineering team, when it comes to processes and things to do, start as in a way that is reactive, in my experience, because you have no structure around them. So you have just to react to things that happen. And then when these things happen frequently, or you become aware that there is a problem, it creates that, that energy to turn them into proactive. So you create a process to anticipate them and to do intentional work about them. And my take is always, as much as possible, to turn reactive work into proactive. Any kind of work, really, because I think it gives really people a different psychological attitude also towards work, because proactive work always is intentional. People are happy because it's like it's under their control, while instead reacting to stuff always feels like something that is like imposed to you, interrupts other things that you are doing. It gives you just a bad feeling, even if, let's say, if you have to sum up the total time that you spend on something, maybe it's the same. Okay, so I would encourage also to always to create processes, even small ones. Like maybe you make a small retrospective every couple of weeks or once a month to check some metrics, but it is something that you do intentionally, rather than you just wait for something very bad to happen to act on that, with the firefighting mentality. But I don't know if that answers your question, Adam.
It sounded a little bit negatively, this reactive thing. I actually don't think it is, because you can actually get some relevant reactive I don't know, webhooks or whatever it's going to be. Like, hey, it's a good time to actually take a look at X, because so it's not that bad. Like it's just another point of view and another approach, probably.
It's true.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think I agree with you, and I didn't mean to sound too negative. My point is that if you only address things in a reactive mode, you're probably limiting what you can do, and people may get pissed off by the fact that there is this let's say interruption every once in a while. But that is how you start. I think that is how you start. I mean, there is some problem that is like urgent, or there is the opportunity also. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. Reactive work is also about good things. And you address it, and eventually, but you should, I think it's helpful to keep a mindset of how can I try to make this more proactive and anticipate what can happen, rather than only reacting to stuff. That is maybe more positive, put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I can share, our team's experience. I'm wondering, maybe should I do a very short product demo, because the answer is that we use our own product a lot. Is that too salesy? Okay, I'll just quickly show.
You can do Ari, no problem.
Yeah. I'll just show you quickly like the main things we do. So every week when we have a demo where we showcase what we've been doing, we go to this view which is called the work log, and we look at at the top you see the feature work in the stories. At the bottom you see the everything else and the bugs and the reactive work. So this is where we have every week the discussion, like what did the week look like? Were we able to focus on the stuff that we had planned for, or did the everything else lane and everything explode? Then when we finish stories, we look at them, and maybe I'll take something that's been worked on longer. We look at the flow efficiency, and this should be close to blue all the time. If it's light, like not during the weekends, but if it's light, then it means that there was interruptions on the work. Why did we shift focus? And we also look at the high level version of this, where you can see like all the stories in this, for the 6 months, and we discuss like why, like if something had a break like this, what is happening? Like what was this week about? We do this in the retrospectives that we have. And there's a lot of other metrics also that we discuss every now and then, but then we have working agreements for our team. We run bi-weekly retrospectives. We have a fairly big team with 10 developers. So having a retro every 2 weeks is not like too long of a cadence. If it would be a very small team, we could do it once per month. And then in the beginning of the retro, we go through all of our working agreements. And if there's something like we've agreed on trying to, merge pull requests in less than 5 days, what are the pull requests that are the exceptions? We'll have this discussion like why did things linger and stuff like that. So this is sort of like our way of doing like this proactive work. So we have these sort of good ways of seeing like what's happening in our everyday development environment, and we have these places, the demos and the retrospectives, where we have these discussions on like to make sure that we're really doing what we want to do.
Makes a lot of sense. I have a question. I don't know if anybody has any questions before that. Otherwise, I go myself. So I was thinking, when you showed your workflow as a team, showing Swarmia, but even before, when you mentioned the engineering investment, it comes to my mind that this is not just an engineering thing, right? I mean, it's a product and engineering workflow and agreement. The fact that you're spending that time on new stuff, that time on improving things, that you maybe have retrospectives about how you work it together. This is not probably just about engineers. So I wanted to ask, who is involved in this process? I mean, in retrospectives, in checking out how you work, are there for example, product managers involved in these, or art designers involved in these? Do you work like all together, this across functional teams, or are there ceremonies only reserved to some subsets of the team?
Yeah, our product team has a designer and a product manager, and then we have 10 senior engineers. But we have very product-minded engineers. So we actually, like what we do is that so we have stories, and each story has a story owner, and that is actually never the product manager, but it's always an engineer. And they are responsible for making sure that the story is on time and they get people on board. And so we sort of have people working like as an engineer, but doing product things. And then our product manager is in all of our dailies, in all of our retros, in all of, the demos and stuff like that. So we do run what you would call an empowered team setup.
And you think that's the secret sauce? I mean, to have engineers who are responsible top to bottom of a feature, even from a product perspective. So it's not like in the meme that you post about posting tickets on Jira and people just write code. No, they are actual owner of the product side of the feature. After maybe some goals and requirements have been shared, but they stay owners from top to bottom.
Yeah, well, I hate secret sauces and silver bullets because there's none. But I believe that if you can do that, it requires that you have you can make teams like this. But if you can do it, I believe that, and for a good reason, I'm not the one who invented empowered teams. It's a very, very, it's from Marty Kagan's book when he sort of explained how do the very product-oriented teams in Silicon Valley and elsewhere work. But you solve a lot of systematic issues. So how I think about it is that if you can make the system work naturally in a way that is correct, then you should do it. Many times having a small team, it's easier to align. And when you can't solve the issue with just by changing the system around you, you introduce processes. For example, we didn't want to, from our team, just as an example, we have a fairly large team. And when you have 10 senior engineers, it's not always senior engineers love bike shedding. And sometimes it feels like, you want to be more focused, you'd have a smaller group. And we could have split the team, but the trade-off would have been that, well, then we have only a single product manager. We would have needed to hire another designer, or then have this very weird setup where we share resources. And also it's not easy, you get built silos. Every time you split the teams will start living their own lives. So we introduced process, which is the story owner that I explained. So that is a way for us to scale a larger team while maintaining ownership all the time. So if you can sort of build these wonderful empowered teams, if you can make the system behave correctly, then it's nice. If you can't, then you need to sort of find small things that you can do to move the system slowly to the direction where you have more empowered teams, or where you have ways of solving the issues that you have.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So we are running out of time. Maybe we have time to pick just one last question if there is any. Otherwise, we can wrap it up. Is there anything else you want to ask to Ari? I think we are good. Thank you so much, Ari, for the talk and for the wonderful Q&A. Thank you everyone who joined for your great questions. Really enjoyed this talk. Thank you, Ari.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure. Hope to see you again sometime.